Hello, so I'm going to be talking about the Spartans today. So it's going to be like three sort of facts that you may or you may not know. So, what was it like to be a Spartan? Well, it sort of started from the day the baby was born. It was called infanticide, and it was a common practice back in the days during the Spartan times, and it was actually ordered by the state. So newborn babies were brought in front of a council of inspectors and examined for any defects. If any had any so-called defects or didn't pass these so-called fitness tests, they were abandoned and left to die. It was a lot of endurance sort of thing. So it was believed that they were used to be tossed over a cliff, but now they sort of believe that actually they were just sort of left in the wilderness and maybe they were picked up by passerbys. So you don't know what the kind of lifestyle the baby would have had, or they would have obviously just been left to die of exposure or wildlife and things. So if they did pass the Spartan tests, well, when they turned 7, they were removed from their parents and put into a training regime which supposedly moulded them into a skilled warrior and to be a moral citizen. At the age of 12, they were deprived from all clothing but a cloak, and they were forced to sleep outside and make their own beds. They were encouraged to scavenge and steal food, but if they were caught, they would be punished, so they sort of trained them to be good at it, or at least they learnt to be good at it. They went to a normal type of school and studied the typical topics like poetry and reading, but the elders would often encourage fights amongst them, so any so-called weaklings were teased and mocked by their peers and their elders, so they were really encouraged to be like a typical real man. Spartan girls also participated in hazing and shunning the men who did not appear adequate, singing songs about them and ridicule them to encourage them to up their game. Now, the Spartan army, male citizens were forced to be in the army and not leave until the age of 60, so the manufacturing sides of things were left to the lower class, skilled labourers, craftsmen and traders. They were part of the Perieki, a class of free non-citizens. Agricultural and food productions was left to the enslaved helots, who made up the majority of the Spartans' population, which was quite strange and quite ironic because the number of helots that were there, that's the reason the Spartans were in fear, and they were so in fear of a revolt from their enslaved helots. That's why they were building up their army and building up a strong military. So one of the nastiest sort of practices involved that was called the contest of endurance, where young people were beaten, or what is called flogged, which is beaten with a whip to see how much pain they could endure. Sometimes it led to death, which could have basically meant that they were just not fit enough to be a Spartan. In front of the sacred site, this all happened in front of the sacred site, Artemis Othia, who was the goddess who was associated with nature, fertility, and childbirth. Once Sparta started decline and went under the control of the Roman Empire, this sort of turned into a blood sport, and it was actually held in an amphitheatre, which would attract tourists. Now, once a man reached 21, they would be elected to a cistitia, which was basically a military-style handout of food. Citizens were gathered for public meals, although food was deliberately scarce. They were brought up to believe that being overweight was wrong, overeating was wrong, and the only way to be was to be devoted to fitness. Anybody they considered to be overweight were ridiculed and sometimes banished from the state. Surprisingly, actually, they did not drink that much alcohol. In fact, to discourage children to drink excess of wine, because that's what they did drink when they actually forced the slaves, the helots, to get drunk so they could show what fools they became under the influence of alcohol. So relationships, men would marry at the age of 30 and women at the age of 20, although some men did marry earlier but would not have been allowed to live with their wives until they had finished their military duty. Marriage wasn't really anything to do with love, although I'm sure some did. It was actually more to do just with reproduction, so they would need to consider their potential partners for their health and their fitness before marrying them. If it turned out they could not have children, they were mocked. It was assumed, unless otherwise proven, it was the man who could not have children. So Spartans did not surrender. It was built into them that only a coward would do so. If any did, they were shamed, and for many who did cower in battle, they would end up committing suicide because they were so abused by it, being ridiculed and things. The only way they could sort of go back on it was if they were given a chance to go into battle again and basically die in battle. Actually, Spartan mothers said to their sons leaving for war, return with your shield or on it. If they died in battle, they were reviewed as having completed their duties. The law actually stated that only 2 classes of people were to have names inscribed on their tombstones: those who died in childbirth or to those who died in battle. No other person had one. So that's a few facts about the Spartans. Thanks for watching. Please like if you like the video and subscribe if you want to. Bye!